Hello everyone, and welcome to a special collaboration between two powerhouses of history, podcasting / memeing. I am Neil Eckert of the War and Conquest podcast, and I am joined today by one of my best internet friends, Constantine, from the Facebook page Daily Updates on the Status of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Neil.
I always get the syntax of that long-ass title you have for your page confused.
Daily Updates on the Status of the Roman Empire.
Okay, yeah. He is one of the... I don't want to call you a shit poster, but you kind of are sometimes.
That's probably accurate, yeah.
Yes. Well, I know some people take offense to that, but other people wear it as a badge of honor. I didn't know. I wasn't entirely sure which category you fall into.
I'm super proud.
Okay, he's loud and proud. Constantine has taken a break from his daily routine of looking for pictures of Spider-Man to come help me with an idea I've had banging around in my head for a couple years now. Him and I are both big fans of the HBO show The Sopranos, as are millions of other people. We're not trying to act like we're special, like, oh, we're the only ones who understand it and like it. It's one of the most popular and important shows in TV history, and one of my watch-throughs, I picked up a few historical parallels between the characters in the show. That I'm sure a couple of them were intentional, and I'm almost positive the rest were just grasping at straws to see this idea to its logical conclusion, or illogical, depending on your opinion on the matter. So I think we're just going to dive right in and discuss the possible historical connections between the cast of The Sopranos and the imperial family of Augustus at the fall of the Roman Republic.
So the Sopranos are basically the Julio Claudians.
Essentially, yes, and the people surrounding that era. You know, I have a few people on my list who aren't exactly Julio Claudians, but they were people who interacted with the Julio Claudians and were contemporaries of that world.
Friends of.
Yes. We're going to get very, very allegorical here, as little Carmine would say. Although we are actually using allegorical correctly, unlike little Carmine, who is, in the words of Tony, it's common knowledge that he's half retarded.
But happy.
Yes, he is. He is happy at the end of the show. And I've seen a fan theory that says that little Carmine actually won the game of the Mafia. That he is actually the one who supposedly takes out a hit on Tony Soprano in the end of the show, and he has manipulated events to get to the point that he is boss of the family, and the New York family is no more.
I've read that as well, and not to skip ahead a little bit, but would that make little Carmine Claudius?
You know, I was very tempted to call him Claudius because he is half retarded, but for Claudius, I have Bobby Bacala. But there are definitely parallels between the two of them.
Yeah.
But that's jumping ahead, though.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, so what inspired my dive into this was when I noticed the exact name similarities between the character of Livia, who is Tony's mother, and Livia in history. I mean, they both have the same name. That was an easy connection to make. But if you look below the surface, there are a lot of things that connect these two characters. They're both women who backed powerful men and have a lot of importance in their local circles. They are very conniving and manipulative, and they both were mothers of very important people in the show, or Roman history, depending on which character we're talking about.
And there may or may not be some murders.
Yes, I mean, that is one of the most popular ancient conspiracy theories there are, the Livia killed everybody theory, which it's a self-explanatory theory that Livia killed everyone in her way to pave the path for her son Tiberius to eventually be the last man standing, viable to take the imperial throne from the dead Augustus.
The theory is she killed Germanicus, right?
It's, well, that's the whole Pisonian, or one of the Pisonian conspiracies. There's multiple of them in this time period. It's hard to say. I mean, real historians will tell you that it was Piso's own dislike of Germanicus, because they had a very tight rivalry going back and forth, and Piso was backed by Tiberius, who was getting jealous of Germanicus, but it's just as easy to believe that Livia killed Germanicus as well. Poison was definitely suspected, so if there was a culprit, a modern-day detective would definitely bring in Livia for questioning. Whether they would find anything or not is...
Right.
I mean, she's one of the most powerful women in world history, so you can't exactly just knock on her door with a search warrant. Considering her son is in control of the legal system, and the military, and just about everything else in the Roman world.
That's why I liked when you told me this idea. I liked it because the mob and the Roman emperors have quite a bit in common. It's not primogeniture in the mob, but it is still family takes over. So I think there's a lot of connections, even more than just the characters.
The Julio Claudians in particular, they're definitely they're one of the most famous families in ancient and in world history in general. I mean, Augustus was one of the most significant figures in all of world history, not just Western or Italian history.
Absolutely.
And so it's natural for a bunch of people to make connections. And if you notice, especially in the first season of The Sopranos, you can see several direct lines to Rome. You know that David Chase, the creator of the show, is definitely a Romophile. You know, he has that one conversation when they're threatening to cut the Jew's dick off for not selling the hotel.
Yes.
He brings up the story of the Masada, which leads to one of my favorite lines in the entirety of the show. And the Romans, where are they now? And Tony replies, you're looking at him, asshole.
You ever heard of the Masada? For 2 years, 900 Jews held their own against 15,000 Roman soldiers. They chose death before enslavement. And the Romans, where are they now?
You're looking at him, asshole.
I was going to bring that up. That is one of my favorite scenes in the entire show.
Yeah, and then a little bit later you have Junior and Tony talking about Augustus.
Octavian. You know, Augustus. Are you fucking with me? No. Octavian became Augustus.
And then you have later in the show Ralphie's obsession with Gladiator. And they didn't have buzz cuts in ancient Rome.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
He's fucking obsessed with Gladiator.
In this world or the next, I shall have my revenge.
Here we go.
No, I'm telling you, it's like the chariots are going through the fucking house. I have come to reclaim Rome for my people. I have come to reclaim Rome for my people! Come on!
With Junior, that's when he becomes like the de facto head of the mob, right? But Tony's still actually in charge.
Yeah, that's when they prop him up as the boss.
And he orders a hit on like a drug dealer. And Tony's like, hey, you gotta be like Augustus. You can't be like Julius.
Yeah, he was loved by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
David Chase definitely had some Roman parallels, so that really helped nurture this idea. And for our next character on the list, I mean, Tony is obviously Augustus. I mean, that one you don't really... I mean, even a non-historical person could have made that connection.
That one's
He's
pretty
the
clear.
head of both his own family and the crime family. He's a headstrong and charismatic guy. Although, I mean, a one-to-one comparison isn't perfect because Augustus would be a far better mob boss than Tony Soprano ever could be.
Tony had his faults.
Yeah, Tony definitely had it. Well, so did Augustus, but Augustus knew how to use the people around him to alleviate those faults, instead of, well, killing half of the people who could have helped him in his time of need.
Right.
I was watching a clip on YouTube the other day, and a commenter brought up an interesting point. He says, Tony is the reason for his family's fall, because if he still had all the soldiers who had come out of prison who ended up dead at his hands, then New York more than likely would have been more hesitant to go to war with him. If he had heavyweights like Feech Lamanna and Ralphie and Richie and Pussy all around, well, Pussy, he would have died either way, but if he had all of those people surrounding him, it would have been much harder for the New York families to move against him. But as it was, he kind of paved the way for his own destruction.
That is one of the theories, like, there's so many with this show, too, just because of how it ended.
And then I put that, I don't know if you saw that on the list I sent you, but on my list of characters, I have the black screen as the end as the Goths/Ottomans, because they were both the things that ended the good times that we had along the way, both in Roman history and watching The Sopranos.
Black screen at the end.
Yeah, that black screen, one of the most infamous ending of any media in history, really.
I was shocked.
Yep, just because Tony's dead, that's what I believe.
Yeah. On how he died.
I mean, I believe it. I mean, I don't know if that number is correct or not, but I believe there's a lot of them out there. Like I said, it's one of the most popular shows in cinematic history. People are going to have harebrained ideas like us who try to make connections that very possibly aren't there.
Augustus probably pretty clearly died of old age, though, right?
Well, they believe he might have been actually poisoned in the end, but he would have died either way. Like, Livia was just trying to ease him along, like, all right, we had everything in motion. All the pieces are set on the board. Now Augustus can die. I mean, he probably would have died in a few days anyway, but there didn't want to be any confusion about who was in charge of Rome at that point.
So she could get the child diddler Tiberius on the throne.
That was what the Livia killed everybody conspiracy theorists believe, and I'm at least partway in their camp. I'm not a full Livia truther, but, I'm at least halfway in the camp.
Well, there's probably a little bit of the evil stepmother vibe going on with her a little bit.
Yes, which is a very popular trope in ancient and Roman in particular fiction and plays and stuff like that. The evil stepmother is a very, very old writing trope that goes back thousands of years in human history. Which brings me to my next point, that I was really struggling to find a lot of roles for the female characters in this story, because it seems like almost all the women in the Julio Claudians are either painted as villains or are just non-entities. So, for someone like Carmela, for instance, it was really hard for me to find a historical parallel, so I just wrote down that she represents the good side of Livia, the nurturing side who stood by Augustus through all of his problems, and helped him woo senators to certain causes or things like that. Because Carmela, despite all her faults and nagging of Tony, in the end stands by her husband to the very end, as the real-life Livia did.
And she was, in the show, she was also incredibly supportive of the children, like over everything.
And unlike the real Livia, she didn't have multiple branches of the family that she had to kill off so her own children could be successors to her husband.
I don't know if Augustus had multiple affairs, though, like Tony did.
He did.
Did he?
Some people believe that he even actively encouraged, or was actually actively encouraged by Livia. Like, she would select his sexual partners because she couldn't have children.
Carmela also knew Tony was having affairs.
Yeah,
so.
she even admitted to Father Phil. She says that she sort of tacitly went along with it. She said it was like masturbation for him. Yeah, like I said, Carmela is kind of hard, and so are the other women, but the one woman who was easy to pick out was Janice. And she is most definitely Agrippina, the mother of Nero and the murderer of the Emperor Claudius. Because Janice is definitely a chip off the old block. She was definitely her mother's daughter, and Agrippina was definitely the spiritual successor to Livia when it came to murderous dynastic family politics. It is very commonly believed that she was the murderer of Claudius, because Nero, after his ascension, gave his centurions the watchword, the greatest of mothers, and even wrote a poem about how mushrooms gave him the imperial crown. And that was the last thing that Claudius ate before he died.
Does she die in the show? I can't remember.
Janice does not die. She gets beaten up a couple times, but she never dies. She kills Richie April, which is why I gave her the Agrippina role.
That's right.
And she gets beaten up by the Russians after she steals the Svetlana's leg, but she doesn't die. Bobby dies, but she doesn't die. Because women, generally speaking, don't get involved in the mob world. They don't get taken out unless they're active participants in the game.
Because Agrippina's ending was, if I'm remembering correctly, was pretty terrible.
Nero had her boat rammed out at sea, and then she swam to shore, and then centurions came and stabbed her in the stomach. And supposedly when they came to kill her, she exposed her stomach and said, "Stab me here where that monster came out of me," pointing to her womb, which is a pretty badass way to go. I mean, that's one big fuck you to the person who's ordering your visit to the afterlife. So yeah, that's where I placed Janice, and I feel very confident in my Agrippina role because she was definitely the manipulator, a second Livia, and she probably should have been murdered for all of her meddling in mob politics.
Yeah, she was one of the ones that I always thought would die, and then didn't.
Yeah, they just kept stringing her along. I mean, the actress does an amazing job. I mean, I have nothing against the actress, just her character was very dislikable. Alright, so moving on. Now we get to Christopher, and it was a bit tricky. I eventually put him down as Germanicus in my list, but he could very well be Tiberius as well.
Is that for him dying too soon, being Germanicus?
Yeah, Germanicus was the person that everybody had put all the hopes in and ended up dying too soon. And the Tiberius side of it is everybody put their hopes in him and he ended up being a fuck up. So no matter which way you look at it, it works for Christopher because, Christopher was Tony's point guy for a while, and yet he just kept slipping back into drugs and just ruining his life, eventually causing Tony to murder him.
He was incredibly loyal to Tony, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was, but at the end of the day, you really can't trust a junkie with important things because eventually the drugs are more important. And I believe Tony made the right decision by killing him, especially after he almost killed him in a car accident while being on drugs. After he had his own child with the car seat in the back seat. It was a really powerful scene that surprised a lot of people.
He was doing meth, wasn't he?
Heroin. I think he might have done meth occasionally, but he did cocaine and heroin were his two big ones. For our next member of the list, I have Paulie. And this is another one who's split. I have him as Tiberius because he was the old guy who was the last one alive. One of the last scenes of The Sopranos is Paulie sitting alone outside of Satrialis because everyone else is dead.
Yeah, he made it.
Yep, he made it through, and he was also an odd bird, just like the real-life Tiberius. I could spend an entire episode talking about Tiberius and all the weird shit he got up to on Capri, but
yeah, in the pool.
I don't want to get flagged off. With the minnows nibbling at him. Some really weird stuff. I feel like I'm compelled to put Paulie as Agrippa as well, because he was definitely Tony's point man whenever it came to violence. Like, most of the murders that aren't committed by Tony are committed by either Christopher or Paulie. He was the guy when somebody needs to die or get roughed up, send in Paulie.
He killed Big Pussy, right?
Yeah, well, they all did. It was Sylvia, Tony, and...
Oh, that's right.
I suppose we should have put
on the boat.
A spoiler warning before we did this episode. We're getting into a lot of spoilers for Sopranos.
The show has been out for a long time, so...
Yeah, you have had, more than a decade and a half to watch it, so... And you clicked on a video that had the, so... I don't... Actually, no, I take it back. I don't feel bad at all. Fuck you people who haven't seen The Sopranos.
I could put spoilers in the title to help the
simple people. We'll put it in the opening card there. And then on to Sylvia. We have the other side of the dynamic trio, and I have him as Maecenas, who was Augustus's political advisor. He sent Agrippa when violence needed to be done, and Maecenas got sent when you needed the political Machiavellian solution to the problem. And as consigliere, Silvio definitely fulfills that role to a T. He is Tony's best and most loyal friend throughout the show, and I believe that he is a very good parallel to Maecenas.
I think of Silvio as that face is the face of gonna do a hit basically, or go beat somebody up.
Which surprisingly, we don't really see Silvio kill that many people. He kills Pussy, he kills Adriana, and he kills that one guy that wants him to flip. But I think that's the only 3 violent acts that we see, or murderously violent acts we see on The Sopranos by Silvio.
Yeah.
Whereas Paulie kills a dozen people or so during the course of the show. That's why I put him as the Germanic or the Tiberius / Agrippa role. Because Tiberius, before he became a old grouchy pedophile, was one of the greatest generals that was living in Rome at the time. He conquered large swathes of the Balkans and Germany and helped stabilize the empire after the Teutoburg Forest incident. So, like I said, with Paulie, it could go either way.
The Illyrian War, that Tiberius, that's one of the more underrated, I think, Roman stories that doesn't get talked about enough.
It's he has to march from Germany to the Balkans to stop a rebellion of 100,000 Illyrians that just happened overnight. Just overnight, there's 100,000 people just killing Roman garrisons and stuff. And he crosses the breadth of the Roman Empire with legions, crushes it, and then goes back and then beats the shit out of the Germans who got rowdy in the absence of the Rhine legions. It's really he's a fascinating character. Just a shame how he turns out. Which is, I feel like that makes the even stronger case for Christopher as Tiberius. Because he had all this potential. He was a loyal person, and then eventually he threw it all away in the end.
All because Augustus didn't love him?
Yep, all because, Augustus was trying to get his own sons as his descendants until Livia and this natural selection weeded them out. But this is a really tricky one for the next one. We have Uncle Junior. I have him as Mark Antony until season 3, because he is the opponent of Augustus, And up until season 3, he is still plotting to take over the family from his nephew. And then he sort of switches into a more advisory role as the show goes on. He begins to lose his hunger for the game, and he becomes one of those advisors to Tony. So after season 3, I'm having a hard time placing Uncle Junior.
He gets kicked out of the family, right? Or not kicked out, but like out of the circle anyway.
Well, he doesn't have power anymore because he's under house arrest and going on trial.
Right.
And by the time the trial's over, he has like half dementia already, and so then he shoots Tony.
Oh.
And then they just send him to the psychiatric ward for the rest of his life.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a sad story with Uncle Junior. Uncle Junior is one of my favorite characters in the show just because of all the jokes he tells. Every time I see someone who's like a dating profile or whatever, it's like RN, I think of that one scene where Tony walks in. Did you offer my nephew something to drink? I'm not maid, I'm registered nurse. He's like, what, did you offer him an aspirin then?
Did you offer my nephew something?
I'm registered yours. Not maid.
Did you offer him an aspirin?
It gets me every time, and every time I see like RN or LPN or whatever, I want to quote that to people. Yeah, there's a lot of great moments between Tony and Uncle Junior, especially when they stop trying to kill each other. So, what do you guys think about our theories here? Do you leave your suggestions and thoughts and arguments in the comments below? And we may do a part 2. There's still more people on my list here, but we got long on time. We could do maybe, if you guys like this video, we'll do a part 2 of all the secondary characters on the show. Maybe I'll give Constantine some time to actually watch the show before we do this, because I know it's been a while since he's seen it. So maybe we'll give him a chance to do a few season rewatch before we start doing any more of these videos. So the next one might be another month or 2 down the road, but him and I are definitely on board to do a second episode if you guys want to do that. So, if you haven't heard of us before, I run a history podcast called War and Conquest. Releases every week, unless there's a hiccup in my schedule, which there rarely ever is, because I don't do much else besides play video games, go to work, play baseball, and podcast. So if you're into medieval and ancient history, check out my show. And if you're into a lot of memes about ancient Rome and about how it's gone, check out Constantine's page, daily updates on the status of the Roman Empire.
You nailed it.
Did I get that right? Look at me go. I always doubt myself mid-sentence, but sometimes I pull it off. And a lot of times, him and I share memes with each other too, so we all oftentimes like each other's memes. So if you go to one of our social media pages and like a lot of the content and style of humor there, you'll definitely like the other ones.
And on YouTube, I am Pax Romana, if you wanted to check that out as well.
Yes, I'm War and Conquest. But you already knew that if you clicked on one of our videos, so you only have to remember one of those now because you're likely already a subscriber to the other one.
Put spoilers in the title.
Yes, we got to remember to do that. This is your spoiler alert as we're closing out this video where we spoiled half the show for you already. Be warned,
Sorry to ruin
spoilers behind. Because they close out this show with a quote, "In our time-honored tradition of doing everything ass backwards, here's the spoiler, a warning." And with that, I hope you guys all have a great week, month, year, however long it takes to get to the next video. And I'll catch you on the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll catch you on the next one.
We will.